I'm Kate Winkler Dawson.
And I'm Paul Holzer.
This is Buried Bones.
Hey, Kate, how are you?
I'm doing well. Have you been thinking about this case, Paul?
I've been thinking about it all week. What's going on? Yes.
What's going on? I was trying to not snicker every time you said he when we were talking about the offender. And I said, I wonder if he's going to get mad at me, which is why I put the reveal at the very end, because then you wouldn't have time to be mad at me when I said, oh, it's a woman.
No, I am so used to you just leaving me hanging and bamboozling me and all of that. So it's all good.
It's my job. I know. I've been called a lot of things. I'm not sure a bamboozler is something I've ever been called, but I appreciate it. Well, let's get into this because there's a lot of background. So the first half of this was very forensic-y, lots of pictures and talk about wounds and weapons and who the potential offender is. Now we know who the offender is. And now you're going to have to kind of get into the criminal profiling part of this, or the offender profiling, because this is not an open and shut case. As you can tell, a woman who is being accused of murdering her two former roommates who, as we get into this, were very good friends. So let me go ahead and do the recap, and then we'll get right back into it. If you've had any lingering questions or thoughts, you can certainly talk about that after the recap.
Sure.
Okay. So 1931, a train arrives from Phoenix to Los Angeles. There are a couple of steamer trunks, a small brown suitcase, and a hat box that smell. There are body parts belonging to one woman in various locations in these different things, and then another woman who is curled up in the fetal position. Both are dead, and there has been oozing and smells. There was a woman who showed up with a friend of hers who was college age. His name was Burton, and they claimed the trunks, but then when they thought it seemed a little like maybe somebody was suspicious of them because of the ooze, they said, we don't have the key, and then they took off, and they're in the wind. And in the meantime, they've put together all of this information about the two women who were murdered, and they are Sammy and Ann. They are roommates in Phoenix, and one is a nurse, and they seem to, so far from what we know, have had unextraordinary lives. We haven't had any red flags, except when they finally figure out, because they know who Burton is, because I'm assuming they paid him and knew his first and last name, they found out who the roommate is. And they found out who the other woman is, and the other woman is Winnie Judd, who Winnie Ruth Judd is a pretty famous name. And when people have pitched this to me, which of course I said was a fantastic idea, it's always as the trunk murderess, which is what she was known for. And so, we kind of get into the world of tuberculosis, of independent young women, in Phoenix, and, a kind of a manhunt for this mysterious woman. Did I cover it?
That sounds pretty good. Now, when Winnie shows up with Burton in the L.A. train station, they know who he is. He's a local USC student, college age.
Yep.
Does he have any connection to Phoenix at all?
It doesn't seem like it right now, no, except this is his sister. She is a woman that passengers start to remember and recognize who was on the train with the hat box and the small suitcase.
Oh, okay. So this explains, so you have the two steamer trunks that are, in essence, checked, right? So when he brings those to the train out in Phoenix, that goes over to the train staff to, in essence, put them in cargo for transport. But she holds on to the suitcase and the hat box. And so when she gets off and things are not looking right, she leaves those in the bathroom at the train station in L.A.
Got it. Abandoned all of it.
Okay.
If they had not known Burton's name, because he had worked for them, as a porter, I guess, on a freelance gig over Christmas to earn extra money, then I don't know if they would have identified her, because I'm sure she paid cash, and eventually they would have figured out with the roommate situation. But yeah, this is where it all starts to kind of unravel.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting to me is why is Winnie, and I'm presuming Winnie is the one responsible for Sammy and Ann's death, dismemberment, and transport to the train station. Mm-hmm. Imagine the risk that she's taking. She in essence is transporting 2 homicide victims, plus the evidence from the crime scene with her out to L.A. Mm-hmm. So I have to conclude at this point that in her mind, because she's a former roommate of the 2 victims, that she would naturally presume that she would become a suspect. And so fundamentally, she is trying to hide that a crime has committed inside that condo, at least for as long as possible, so she can set up maybe an alibi or put distance between her and the crime scene in terms of physical distance as well as temporal distance, how much time has passed before authorities discover that, these 2 victims are victims of homicide.
But it seems so disjointed. So she gets rid of these mattresses. I don't know how. But she leaves blood underneath Ann's, on the floorboards and underneath Ann's bed. It seems like she almost gets halfway through cleanup and then changes her mind, and then halfway through something else and then changes her mind. I just don't understand what her mindset is, but maybe we will as we go along.
I think she got in over her head. That's what happened.
Yeah.
And that's she's now taking shortcuts just to get out of Dodge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's get into this. So Winnie is Ann Burton. They're both the children of a minister and from Indiana. And Winnie moved to Phoenix from Mexico. She had been in Mexico in 1930, so just a year before. And Winnie is also a lunger, so she had tuberculosis. So everybody's coming to Phoenix. So she's there for about a year, and she becomes friends with Ann. Ann and Winnie work at the same clinic. Remember I told you Ann's a nurse, and she's an X-ray technician. And Winnie is a medical secretary. They become friends, and Winnie moves in to this duplex. And over a game of cards, they listen to, I can just sort of picture this as so 1930s. So they play bridge all the time, and they all like to listen to The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which was a radio show. And they have late night parties and hang out with, well-to-do Phoenix men. They're all attractive. And so, things get very complicated. They become good friends, but then their love lives start happening. Nobody's had luck in this whole apartment with love. Anne had been married. I told you that. Winnie had not been very lucky in love either. Her husband is a guy named Dr. William Judd, and he is 23 years older than her. He is addicted to narcotics, and he had trouble holding a job, and they got married when she was only 19, and she had 2 miscarriages. And so she, it sounds like, kind of left him and moved in with these women and wanted to kind of start over. So her family was giving the detectives in LA some background on her. And eventually they would talk to William, her husband, and they would say, what is she like? And they said that she would sometimes fantasize about what life would have been like if she had given birth to a baby named Moses, Caesar, or Napoleon. She would talk to William about the baby's milestones and their adventures. She was making up these stories. He thought it was silly, but I think upon reflection, he wonders if there was some sort of psychosis going on. Frequent moves and financial struggles isolated William and Winnie, and she eventually, had hoped that she would just stay in Phoenix. And that they would stay married. But in 1931, he was again out of a job, and he took off and went to LA to look for work. And she was there, now living with these women. By June of 1931, all 3 by 1931 had tuberculosis. And so Anne took off and went to Portland for the summer to be with her family. And Winnie and Sammy are now together.
So when you say Winnie and Sammy are together, is there more than just a friendship?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay.
But I think they were trying to support each other. I mean, tuberculosis is not you take a pill and it's over with. It's a very long disease. And so I think they were trying to help each other out. So Anne left in June, and it left Sammy and Winnie together just to kind of support each other. In August, Anne comes back, and they're all three of them living together. They were friends, but this is also now the Great Depression, so there's just a self-preservation happening here. They are very low wages. And pretty soon, this is a small place. Remember, there's one bedroom. And eventually, they kind of separate so that Winnie moves out into a one-bedroom apartment on Brill Street in early October. And it's close enough where she can walk to work if she wants to. So, there didn't seem to be major fights, according to the detectives, what they found. She just, moved out and moved not too far away. Within weeks, though, these two women are dead. So that's the dynamic. What do you think?
Well, I think the detective's observation or talking to Dr. William Judd, and he's talking about how Winnie is kind of constructing some sort of fantasy life between her and an unborn child. Mm-hmm. And, these names, Napoleon, Moses, and the other name.
Was it Caesar?
Caesar. I mean, obviously these are significant historic figures. Mm-hmm. So I also start to think, okay, there is a mental health aspect going on with Winnie. Now, if she's creating a construct with this fantasy life with a child that she does not have, how is she perceiving Sammy and Anne? Is there potential misperception on Winnie's part just because she's got some... I don't know if I want to use the term psychotic, but she's definitely got some sort of mental illness that's causing her to maybe read into certain things that Anne and Sammy have done or said that she's now feeling slighted by.
And I also had wondered, and you probably know this, I don't know how long that, any of these women had tuberculosis. I wonder if tuberculosis would make things worse if she did have a mental health struggle or would have caused something to begin with. I don't know anything about it, though, in that way.
Yeah, I definitely don't, but it also brings up not only the disease, but what medications are they being given, and maybe Winnie's having, a bad trip, so to speak, from whatever medication was being used for TB back in the 1930s.
Yep. Yeah, and, again, somebody with mental health struggles, when your husband is in work, out of work, and he's an addict, an active addict, that must have just been, she was probably on her back heels the whole time, just trying to figure out what's up and what's down, The police in California and Arizona start searching, of course, immediately. This is a 3 or 4 day long search trying to find Burton and his sister, Winnie. And eventually... they find Burton, and they find William, the husband, and they talk to the Phoenix neighbors, co-workers at the clinic, and during Burton and William's interrogations, the police say it's clear that they had not been involved with the crime. They were very open. They had alibis to attest that neither had been in Phoenix during that month when it happened. So what Burton says is that he first heard about all of this with the trunks when Winnie appeared at USC's campus around 11 a.m. on the day that she arrived in LA. So that October 19th. So if we believe this, she did all of this herself. The trunks go on the train. She goes to LA. She kind of abandons the trunks and immediately goes to USC and finds her brother. And he said that she said to him, "You need to come with me. You need to get these trunks. We're going to sink them. We're going to sink them in the Pacific Ocean." And she doesn't explain why. He tried not to pry, but then, when the station agents started interrogating them, he said that he turned to her after they left and said, "Did you kill someone?" And finally she said that she could justify everything that happened, is exactly what she said. And then she took off. And that was it. And then Burton, is the reason why that she's kind of been caught this early. So then we've got William, who's been taken off the table as an accomplice. We've got Burton, who's been taken off the table by the police. Then they go to Winnie's apartment. Remember, she has that one-bedroom apartment. They find surgical instruments in a satchel. There are also bottles of, okay, tell me if this is right. There are bottles of luminol, which is a non-narcotic sedative. Is that luminol?
I'm presuming so. Now, I'm not familiar with luminol being used in a medical sense, but it wouldn't surprise me. When we use luminol for, visualizing latent blood stains at a crime scene, it's mixed with sodium hydroxide. It's got a buffer. Okay. But the luminol, I think, would be the drug that they would be using.
Phenobarbital, and used as a sedative and to control seizures. Yeah, calming effect and induces drowsiness. So that's what they found, luminol. They also found one suitcase that had men's clothing, a man's surgical shirt, and an article of women's lingerie. There's another suitcase. I mean, boy, she just packed all of these in. Another suitcase that had some blankets, a small caliber shell, which had been fired, we presume, of a 25 caliber shell. Yeah, and a photo album of the family with friends, the Judd family. In the southwest corner of the bedroom under a chair, they find another shell. The shell matches the shells in the bullet in the trunk. They said that there were 9 tablets of poison that were typically in William Judd's medicine cabinet. So he must have lived there off and on, and that the researcher, Allie, said she couldn't find out what kind of poison it was, but the first wife of William died of an accidental morphine poisoning. So if that's what he's addicted to and that's what he had on hand, the poison could have been morphine, I suppose.
Sure. So it sounds like Winnie was looking at a variety of different ways to kill Sammy and Anne, poison possibly being one of the first ways that she thought about. And then the expended cartridge cases, the shells, the 25 caliber shells found at Winnie's place. I kind of wonder, maybe she had no firearms experience, and so these were test shots so she could figure out how a gun works. I don't know if they found any, bullet impacts inside her apartment, or she could have gone outside and shot at a tree, who knows. But the fact that she would be bringing the cartridge cases back inside seems remote, but maybe not.
Well, the mystery expands here. She ends up surrendering on kind of the 4th day of this search, okay? She turns herself in L.A. to the police. A plea from her husband and his assurance that, they would hire the best lawyers is what got her in there. And so he had gone on to newspapers. He had been interviewed by newspapers saying, "Turn yourself in. This isn't going to end well. I will take care of you, I promise." So she turned herself in. She had been hiding at La Vina Sanitarium, where she had been previously treated for tuberculosis. And in a Broadway department store, she had also been hiding in a Broadway department store where she had once been a clerk. Okay, so she's turning herself in.
So out in L.A., Winnie is using Burton as muscle. He's just a patsy. He has no idea, at least when she initially reaches out to him and he shows up at the train station, that this is a homicide case that she's asking him to participate in. So she's needing his help to move these steamer trunks, the suitcases, etc. And it may just be she needs to do that in a quick, kind of non-suspicious manner, having her brother with her. But what's going on out in Phoenix? I mean, she's having to get all of these items out of the apartment, plus 2 mattresses. There's obviously a vehicle involved. Is it her vehicle? She's driving, disposing of these mattresses. One is found, one isn't. But she has to get to the train station and get those items up onto the train. Is her vehicle parked at the Phoenix train station? And if it's not, then I would say somebody transported her there, and that could be your accessory on the front end.
Okay, well, we'll see, because there are at least one more player involved in this. There's at least one more player involved with this I haven't told you about yet.
Of course.
We'll see. Maybe important, maybe not. Okay, we have a confession, which I know seems odd because we're definitely not at the end of this episode. But let me tell you what she says. She gets in, she starts to talk to the police. William did get her a good attorney. Her attorney reads a prepared confession. Now, I don't have a note about whether or not this is to the police or to the press or what is happening, but
sure,
this is what she says.
But it's also filtered through her attorney.
Oh, right. You're right. Okay, so this is what she says through her attorney. I had gone to the girls' home to confront Miss Samuelson, which is Sammy, for some nasty things she had said about Mrs. Leroy, who is Anne. Miss Samuelson got a hold of a gun, and she shot me in the left hand. I struggled with her, and the gun fell. Miss Leroy grabbed an ironing board and started to strike me over the head with it. In the struggle, I got hold of the gun, and Sammy got shot. Mrs. Leroy was still coming at me with the ironing board, and I had to shoot her. Then I ran away from the place, and her hand does have a bullet in it, lodged in it.
Yeah. It's BS.
You can act professional about this, Paul. Look, you're so funny. Your face changed in the middle of that statement.
Well, okay, so think about this. Let's talk about Anne. This is your prototypical, husband accidentally shoots wife.
Yeah.
And she's got a contact gunshot wound to her left temple. Anne has a contact gunshot wound to her left temple. This is a gun that has been placed hard against her head, and the trigger was pulled. This is not a self-defense scenario where now, in the process of defending herself, Winnie shoots Anne. This is an absolute fabrication, and this is the attorney setting up a self-defense case to try to get his client off. But the physical evidence completely contradicts that statement.
Well, I think self-defense is on the table for sure. Her left hand, just so you know, is completely bandaged. She also has a blackish wound between the 4th and 5th fingers on her right hand. Because it is looking like it's developing into gangrene. Winnie is escorted to the Georgia Street Receiving Hospital. They extract a .25 caliber bullet from the base of her middle finger, close to the point where it joined with the fractured index finger. Yeah. There were contusions over much of Winnie's body. So that's going to be part of the self-defense part, obviously, we know, but self-defense, when the victim is fighting back to try to save their own life, does not count.
Well, and we've got an expended cartridge case or shell in Winnie's own apartment. This is, you're going back to that. This is, you see these offenders when they're trying to stage a crime scene. She's shooting herself in the hand. Mm-hmm. She's not shooting herself someplace where it might be fatal. So this all speaks to she's pre-planning her self-defense by injuring herself, both with the gun, as well as maybe she's, throwing herself up against walls and pieces of furniture inside her apartment, realizing, they found out. They've got the steamer trunks, and now I've got to figure out how I'm going to get out of this. and I'm drawing that conclusion just based off of how ridiculous her statement is relative to the physical evidence.
Well, we'll see what the prosecution says. They're now putting together a case, and they're trying to do it quickly because it's already October 29th when she is extradited to Phoenix to stand trial on first-degree murder charges for Ann. They'll have a separate trial for Sammy. So her case involving Ann starts in January, so she's sitting in jail for November and December and most of January. And it's in downtown Phoenix.
So it opens up showing who I'm assuming are the attorneys or the DA involved in the case, and then it's showing a packed courtroom. And then now it looks like the defendant, Winnie Judge, has sat down. She's dressed in a very conservative outfit. She's looking very demure, trying to pretend to be an innocent defendant.
Paul.
Well, but she's been coached, you know.
No.
Try to get the jurors' sympathy. Yeah, and then that's it. So, you know, I think, you know, what stood out to me, like you had mentioned earlier, that Ann, Sammy, and Winnie were all three reasonably attractive women. Winnie is an attractive woman for sure, you know, and so you could see where, you know, the jury could find her as a very sympathetic figure. And so the prosecution, you know, does have a little bit of a hurdle to cross to say that this woman, attractive woman who's sitting there looking innocent, you know, shot and killed two women in Phoenix, cut one of them up and transported their bodies halfway across the United States.
Yep.
I mean, it sounds unbelievable, but, you know, obviously, I mean, there's no question she's involved.
What about, let's go back though to our discussion about, we didn't say psychosis, but the imagining the future of babies who aren't there, the husband who's addicted to stuff, she's got tuberculosis. Can any of that fit into this scenario at the same time?
Well, I think, you know, it fits into sort of the why. Why did she do this? Now, how does this play out in a legal sense, you know, particularly in Arizona, and what are their insanity statutes? You know, from my perspective, you know, she may have some sort of mental illness going on, but take a look at the level, the extent that she went through to try to cover up the crime. That is showing she knows right from wrong. And generally, when you can show that within somebody, there isn't that insanity aspect to them. There may be arguments, mostly maybe on the sentencing side, in terms of, you know, how severe the punishment is going to be because of some sort of diminished capacity situation. But in terms of guilt or not guilt, you know, she knew right from wrong, and she knew what she was doing when she did it, that this was a crime. I mean, it's a horrific crime. She killed two women.
Well, let's continue on because there are two sides to this, and I understand what you're saying, but, you know, I'm not ready to end the podcast right now, Paul, so just bear with me. You're like, I'm ready to go to dinner, Kate. Let's wrap this up.
You're going to try to convince me she's innocent, and that's going to be a big hurdle.
I want to present both sides of this case as the objective journalist that I am. So let me show you what I've got. Okay. The prosecution says that Winnie had acted with premeditation. We've already talked about that. She shot herself, is what they believe. And here is the mystery figure that I had told you we need to mention. There is a romantic rivalry between her husband and a lover that she has become involved with. He is a wealthy Phoenix lumber baron. I don't get to say baron very much with these sorts of stories. His name is Jack, Happy Jack. I put quotes around that. Happy Jack Halloran. We'll go with Jack. And they had been having an affair since December of 1930, so 9 or 10 months or so until this happened. So the doctors at in Phoenix had told the police that a month before the murder, Winnie had taken a pregnancy test because she thought she was pregnant. She was not, it sounds like. They present, also the DA presents what they called the drain pipe letter. So this is, to me, really interesting. So one day after Winnie turned herself in, there was a plumber who was called to that store, that department store where she worked, and said, the owner said, something's lodged into, I think it was the toilet, and it was a wad of telegraph sheets that had been torn up and flushed. Winnie had been, of course, hiding in this space until she turned herself in. It sounds like addressed to her husband and not signed, but it's a confession. And this is, well, so let's see how different this is. According to the letter, on the morning of October 17th, these three women fought over whether they should alert Mr. H, who is, Jack Halloran, to the fact that Winnie had introduced him to a woman who had syphilis. And I don't know if that was the intention for them to sleep together. That's what it sounds like. And this isn't a letter to her husband.
Okay.
So Winnie is defending herself, and she says, I did not set him up with some bad woman, because Winnie said she's undergoing treatment for syphilis, so she's not contagious. Do not tell him this information. Anne said, no, that's awful. I'm going to tell him myself that Winnie is associated with people who have syphilis, and they won't have a thing to do with you, is what Anne told Winnie, if we think Winnie's the one who wrote this letter, which I'm sure we do. Sammy pointed a gun at Winnie, is what Winnie says to her husband in this letter. In fear for her life, Winnie covered the gun's muzzle with her hand, grabbed a bread knife, and after Sammy shot her hand, Winnie disarmed her and retaliated. Believing that Anne had plotted to blackmail her, she shot her too. The letter ends with the writer reasserting that she had killed in self-defense and implying that, she said, I am essentially dead at this point. Forgive me, not forget me, she says. It was as much a battle as Germany and the U.S. I killed in self-defense. So she was at war, she was saying.
And again,
so,
this is BS.
I don't understand the dynamic between Halloran, and Winnie here, but I'm going to see if we hear from him. What do you think about that?
Okay, well, I think, the letter to her estranged husband is interesting. She's having an affair with Jack. And then somehow she sets Jack up to sleep with somebody that she knows ahead of time has syphilis. That's what I'm gathering here. Mm-hmm. Now, when Jack's interviewed, did Jack and Winnie have a falling out?
This gets complicated. I can piece this together, but more information kind of comes out as there's like appeals and stuff like that. But okay. I have Jack's point of view, but it kind of comes out of
a little later. Okay,
yeah.
So let me just address, straight up, this confession to her estranged husband, William.
Yep.
She's saying in this confession that Sammy produced the .25 caliber pistol. And so Winnie, of course, covers the pistol up with her hand, arms herself with the knife, and that's presumably how she gets her injury to her hand, is during this struggle. Mm-hmm. Yet she has expended cartridge cases from that pistol in her apartment all the way out in L.A. that ballistics showed came from that pistol. It mm-hmm. matches the bullets out in Phoenix. So, again, this doesn't make any sense. Why is Sammy out of Phoenix producing the murder weapon? And then why is Winnie taking this pistol? And, in fact, she doesn't take the pistol. The pistol is found inside I think it was the hat box. I mean, mm-hmm. she's in the process of transporting the pistol back. It never makes it back to her apartment. So she had that pistol ahead of time, and then it gets taken out to Phoenix, where she shoots and Sammy. Again, the physical evidence doesn't match the confession. So this is a letter to her estranged husband that is self-serving, and I'm not entirely sure the reason for this whole syphilis aspect. That may just be it's such an outrageous act to set somebody up that you know has such what could potentially be a disfiguring and deadly disease, that there's a reason why Winnie had to act the way she did and kill Sammy and Ann. I think she's just trying to come up with a mechanism as to why she acted out in self-defense. So it's completely self-serving. It doesn't match up with the physical evidence.
Okay. Yeah. And the defense is sort of behind everything to begin with. I mean, the judge is ruling against them for bringing on certain kinds of experts. And nobody's talking about this bloody fingerprint, which I thought was interesting. It was a thumbprint, actually, on the window shade. So we don't hear anything about that. We hear in the defense from two psychiatrists who say she was faking insanity, essentially.
Yeah.
That she was faking insanity, essentially. Oh, also, one interesting note. So there were witnesses who did see Winnie at the duplex because she didn't live there anymore, and it was Friday night. So 10:30 p.m., I just thought you'd be interested in the sequence of events. So 10:30 p.m. Friday night, she kills them and then does whatever she needs to do Saturday, and it sounds like even Sunday, and then she takes the Sunday night train to Los Angeles. So she takes all day Saturday and most of the day Sunday to get this taken care of.
I'm liking that timeline.
Do you feel like she needed an accomplice or no? I know we've kind of touched on this before.
I don't think
she's gonna accuse someone in a minute. I'm just telling you.
I don't think she necessarily needed an accomplice. You know, and when you take a look, I did see that photo of the hallway in Ann and Sammy's apartment where you have the scratches on the floor. It's obvious those scratches are from those metal protective corners on the heavy steamer trunk, and it's being drug. So that suggests to me one person is dragging that trunk at least over that section of the exposed floor. It is a lot of work for one person to do everything that happened, you know, in terms of the dismemberment, the cleanup, the packaging, getting into a vehicle, disposing the mattresses, getting everything out to the train. And that's where I, you know, from an investigative standpoint, is like, well, where's her vehicle? Right. You know, is her vehicle at the Phoenix train station? If it's not, then I have questions. And then, oh, maybe there is an accomplice. And it may be another Patsy where she called up and said, hey, you know, I've got some heavy luggage. Can you help pick this up? And oh, by the way, couple mattresses, you know, bring a truck, and just ignore the fact that one mattress has a bunch of blood on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty, you'd have to have a pretty big Patsy for that. You're right.
Yes.
Okay, the defense does something interesting. She had said it was self-defense. The defense says she's insane. So they enter a plea of insanity. They have psychiatrists and her parents who all take the stand. There's no consensus between the psychiatrist as to her medical state, her mental state. Two think that she has schizophrenia. The third one thinks she has a psychopathic personality with a paranoid strain. Is that a thing?
Okay.
Paranoid strain?
Well, they're putting an additional characteristic onto the psychopathy diagnosis. You know, they're indicating, there's a level of paranoia. You know, and of course with schizophrenia, you can see where you have your paranoid schizophrenic, right? And now they're literally in this world where something is after them. They're paranoid about whatever it is, and so this particular psychologist is going, well, no, she's not schizophrenic. She's psychopathic, but she's got a paranoid aspect to her, you know, and that may be where, you know, she's assessing Ann and Sammy and their behaviors and statements and everything else, and are completely misinterpreting, you know, what they are saying as being somehow harmful to her, and there may be that paranoid filter that she is processing that type of information through. But, fundamentally, I just don't see any real argument for true insanity here. There may be a mental health concern, but I don't think it rises to the level where you can't convict.
Well, let's see. We have a verdict coming up after everybody rests, and she is convicted of first-degree murder. She is sentenced to death, which is supposed to happen in February of 1933. This does not happen because Winnie Judd will not go away. This just keeps going, and it's really interesting. This is like confession rama, I guess is what I would call it. There's a lot of confessions that happen. Okay, so the attorneys demand a retrial. They said there's some kind of jury bias, doesn't work, convictions upheld. There are petitions sent to the governor on her behalf, and she hires new attorneys who file for a hearing before the state Supreme Court. A little less than a month before she's scheduled to hang. Okay, so nothing is working for her. She requests a private conference with her attorney and law enforcement officers and a reporter. She confesses in front of all of these people. And she says she claims self-defense, but she fingers an accomplice who is Jack Halloran.
Of course.
She says that after she shot and killed Ann and Sammy, that he helped her move the bodies and get rid of the evidence. He carried Sammy from the kitchen to Ann's bed, and then he mopped up the kitchen. He wanted to call a doctor. While drawing the shade to make the phone call, he left behind a bloody thumbprint. He pulled Sammy's large packing trunk from the garage, put Ann's body into it, and he said, "I'm taking this to the desert." Then he took Winnie. He told her that Sammy had been operated on, is what he said. So she's saying he dismembered Sammy. At this point, Winnie wanted to just go see William. She felt safe with William, so she went to L.A. and she wanted him to remove the bullet. So she and Jack devised a plan where she would take the trunks with her to L.A. on the Saturday night train, and he would arrange for someone to meet her at the Los Angeles depot to dump the trunk. But she ran into trouble when the delivery men who went to bring the trunk from the duplex to the train station said no, because this one trunk was too heavy and there was blood leaking from the trunk. So they smartly said, they politely declined. Although Winnie was panicked, she decided to move ahead with the plan. She told the delivery service to transport the trunk to her apartment because she was at Ann and Sammy's apartment. The next day, she transferred part of Sammy's dismembered body into the small suitcase. By Monday night, she was on the train. So this is now her. Now, is this more feasible than scenario? I don't even remember which confession the first one was.
Sure. Well, the first thing I want to know is the bloody thumbprint. Was that actually matched to Jack?
No.
Oh, well, okay. So at this point, right now, without that physical evidence, I can't say whether it's more feasible or not. When you were first reading that, I was like, oh, okay, so Jack was there. Now I can't say that. And she's still claiming self-defense, and I still have a massive issue with that, particularly with Ann, because of the contact gunshot wound to the left temple. Yep. So my suspicion is that as she has gone through the trial process, seen testimony, heard evidence and everything else, she is now coming up with another scenario that better fits the information that she knows that the prosecutors have. But it still is way off base from what actually happened. Okay,
well, the saga continues. The Arizona Supreme Court says no to this rehearing, but they are considering, Maricopa County is considering indicting Jack, because this all sounds sort of reasonable to the DA there. I mean, she's not saying I didn't do it. She's just saying I got help. So they try to indict Jack, and she testifies at in front of a grand jury. She reiterates the details of the confession, and she convinced the grand jury that she had, in fact, killed Anne and Sammy in self-defense. And it sounds like the jurymen petitioned for her death sentence to be commuted to life in prison, which is what happened.
Okay.
So she got out of the death penalty. Jack is not indicted. But there is another hearing. God, there's a lot of hearings in this story. There has to be a hearing to figure out whether or not she will be executed or given life in prison. The hearing to determine if Winnie's sentence is to be commuted to life in prison happens in March of 1933. They introduce new witnesses. Someone who is testifying to have smelled burning something coming from the vacant lot to the south of North 2nd Street duplex on the night of October 17th. So essentially, I don't know if they think that's where the mop happened, but that was a, new detail.
Well, that's, the mop itself, even though there was evidence that it had been burned, was, the handle was found in the actual victim's apartment.
Right.
So probably the working end of the mop, the one that got bloody, is what is being burned, along with a mattress, a bloody mattress.
Yeah, and this person did not, it sounds like he didn't explore what that was. So he didn't get out, he could just smell it.
Sure.
So the Phoenix, she talks too much. The Phoenix sheriff said that when he escorted her from LA back to Phoenix, that when she was in his jail, she admitted that while she was repacking the bodies in 2 separate trunks, some of Sammy's, the bladder and the intestines, fell out onto the floor of her apartment. She wrapped the organs in towels and then threw them out the window of the train. So she carried them on to the train in her suitcase, I think, and then tossed them out the window. There was a lot of blood in the breakfast room in the kitchen, is what he's testifying to. And then Jack takes the stand. I can only express as a skeptical look about the tossing the bladder and the intestines out the window of a train.
Well, I think I primarily have a problem, that the intestines and the bladder just fell out. They are somewhat attached to the body. They need to be removed. Now, the intestines, it's not just some, wound up tube inside the body that, you get cut open and they just go everywhere. I mean, the loops of the intestine are actually interconnected. You got this omentum. There's structure to it. Now, yes, it could, when you bisect a body, all of a sudden you've got this intestinal mass, but for the bladder just to fall out, it has to be removed. It literally needs to be cut out in order to, package it. Could she have taken it on the train? Maybe, but, why do that? I can't dispute what she's saying there outside of the fact, they just fell out, so I had to do something. There's something else going on there.
Okay, well, let's keep going because this is the story that never ends, Paul. Jack takes a stand. He says, this is bananas. I was just sleeping with this woman and that's it. And they believe him. William, her husband, says she is not a woman of sound reason. And she still is going to hang. Yeah. The Arizona Board of Pardons and Paroles says we're keeping the hanging. So she's set to hang April 21st of 1933. So this is a full 2 years after this is going on. But 10 days before her execution, the warden of the Arizona State Prison in Florence requests and is granted a sanity trial for Winnie. So there are 10 days of expert testimony. The verdict is in. She is found insane. She has narrowly escaped execution for the second time, and she's transferred to the Arizona State Asylum for the Mentally Insane on April 24th. I don't have details on what people said. It just was enough to convince, I guess this would have been an insanity trial. Would that have been a judge or who? That wouldn't have been a jury, right?
I really don't know. I think with what I'm hearing, they're not overturning her conviction.
Right.
They are now saying at this point, 2 years later,
right,
she now has a true medical illness issue that requires more specialized medical care than what the prison can do. And it sounds like they must convene some sort of panel, if you will, that hears testimony and then says, yes, she does have mental issues and needs to go to this other facility. So she still is under conviction, but because now she is in this other facility and has been deemed insane at that point in time, right before her execution, the state cannot execute an insane person. So in essence, she has escaped the execution as a result of her current medical situation. It's not her mental situation at the time the crime was committed.
Okay. Well, she is transferred to the Arizona State Asylum for the Mentally Insane. Okay, Paul, here we go. This is Winnie's life. Over the next 12 years, between 1939 and 1962, she escapes from prison 7 times.
That's because she's in a low-level, custodial environment, and she's smart enough and sane enough to be able to figure out how she can actually get out of this facility. So I bet she was feigning this insanity aspect, in order to avoid the death sentence.
Listen to this lady. In 1962, she outpaces the police for 6.5 years. 6.5 years.
She's out of custody for 6.5 years?
Yes, 6.5 years from 62 until 68. She is living under the name Marianne Lane, and she's in San Francisco. And I don't mean to laugh at this because she did dismember somebody and murder 2 people. But in 69, Arizona medical experts say, okay, she's sane. We don't want her anymore. And they turn her back over to the state penitentiary in Florence. Is this story over yet? No, sir. It's not.
So she ultimately gets caught in San Francisco.
After 6.5 years, yes.
Wow. So that's between 62 and 68 or 69?
Yeah. And then when they get her back in 69, they say clearly this woman is sane enough to stay, away and elude us for that long.
Yeah.
Stop smiling, Paul.
I'm now starting to wonder, are there any dismembered women in the Bay Area and solve cases, right?
I was thinking about that. I mean, sometimes I say aloud with people, there's no record of them doing anything while they were on the lam, but with this case, I'm not quite sure. No. So then listen to this. So she's back in prison from 69 in the end of the year, 1971. The governor of Arizona, who is a guy named Jack Williams, signs a pardon. And she is free. I have no idea. No idea why. And she's free. She said he said you can never tell your story. That was her only stipulation.
Okay. So, who is bending the governor's ear? There must be somebody pretty powerful that for whatever reason is within Winnie's, circle or is sympathetic to Winnie. That is bizarre.
She's 65 when this happens. So I wonder if he thinks she's not going to dismember that many people at 65. I don't know what he was thinking.
No, I don't know.
Well, it keeps going.
Well, now she's out in the public domain again.
Yep. So she's out. And, I keep thinking people like this are going to die quickly after. She does not. She dies in 98 at the age of 93. Wow. She dies in her sleep peacefully. But her story continues because when she was on death row in 33, she wrote her first and only confession, real confession is what she says happened. So now this is the definitive confession. Right. It was located, and it's now in the state archives in Arizona. So the confession basically confirms the majority of what the prosecutor said during the first trial. She was ashamed of her infidelity, and she was frustrated by Ann because she said that Ann was trying to get money out of Jack. I don't know what's happening with Jack and these women. I don't know what the relationship is. But in this confession, Winnie says that Ann was always asking for money from Jack, and he was giving it to her. And Winnie says that Ann would kind of taunt her about stuff, and she became consumed by wild ideas. She said, I knew my nerves were breaking. I could feel it. She said she acted on impulse. She got the gun. She drove over to Ann's on the first murder attempt. She writes, I waited next door. I was trying to shoot through the window. I started crying so hard I turned and went home. But then she tried again. On Friday, October 16th, she went there, seemingly driven by psychosis, to Ann's duplex. This is according to Winnie. She said, my brain was whirling. I was so excited, I was panting for breath. Never did I have the slightest dream of hurting Sammy. She simply never entered my mind. I expected to get Ann, stop those taunts so I could sleep. Nothing more did I think of. I took the gun and a knife. How I would do it, I was not sure. I hid in the house next door. After they retired, I went to the back door, laid the knife and my shoes outside the door, then crept into the unlocked front door. That insane desire, that power led me on, and I started for Ann. So she describes approaching the bedroom, retreating, falling back asleep on the girl's couch. Finally, in the morning, I crept past the bathroom door, shot Ann. It was a low shot, is what she called it. Sammy came rushing out of the bathroom, and I easily disarmed Winnie. She said, Sammy, I am crazy. I have lost my mind. Give me that gun, and I will blow my brains out right here on this door. Sammy did not give her the gun, smartly. So Winnie ran outside to get the knife. As I grabbed for the gun, I stabbed her in the shoulder. The fight continued, and Winnie got shot through the hand. With Winnie getting shot through the hand until Sammy was dead, essentially. She dragged Sammy's body into the bathroom, cleaned up the kitchen floor, went to the garage to get the trunk. In the bedroom, she slid Ann from the bed onto the trunk. Around 9 or 9:30, she went to work. Leaving Sammy on the bathroom floor, she put the knife and the gun and the bloody pajamas in Ann's locker at the clinic until the end of the day. She fed the cat. She returned to the duplex. She broke in through the bathroom window. At that point, Sammy's body was heavy and stiff. She took 2 cheap knives from the kitchen and severed her body into portions that she says I could not lift. I was hours doing this, and then inch by inch, pulling the trunk back into the living room. That trunk weighed 420 pounds, yet my maniacal condition gave me superhuman strength. She said she tried to destroy the evidence at the duplex. She turned the hose on the front porch, went into the house, got the blood-soaked mattress, and carried it over to the vacant lot at the corner of 3rd and Pinchon, where I struck perhaps about 5 matches onto it. Sunday morning, the next day, at her apartment, she divided the women's corpses between 2 trunks. She washed the gun, accidentally discharging it under the water, and put it in the handbox. Toward the end of her confession, she writes, "From here on, I think most everything has already been known." At the end of the letter, Winnie forbids her attorney from ever divulging this information. The end.
I think things are adding up there. Okay. I'd like to know more details when she says she shot Ann. You know, I want to see, does she actually indicate she put the gun up against Ann's head and pulled the trigger? Because that's what the evidence shows. The one thing that I kind of keyed in on was the stabbing of Sammy in the left shoulder, which The autopsy isn't showing that, and I'm looking at, Sammy's photos now.
Yep.
And she has a couple of marks on her left shoulder.
Maybe they were nicks. I don't know. Let me look at the autopsy report too.
Yeah, there is something on her left shoulder. It's too far away for me to say. I mean, it doesn't, at least from afar, it does not look like a typical stab wound.
There's a superficial puncture, but that's in her neck.
Yeah.
So you would think if he had noted that, wouldn't he have noted a stab wound, even if it was like a nick? I mean, he says
absolutely.
a superficial puncture.
Yeah, that's routine. They need to record all the injuries, whether superficial or actually significant injuries during their autopsy. But fundamentally, that last confession seems to line up best with the evidence. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize the vacant lot where the mattress was found was so close that she could carry a mattress there, which is, you see somebody carrying 2 mattresses.
It depends. I wonder if, I can look this up. I don't think mattresses in the 1930s are the kind of mattresses we think of now. I don't think they're, and these are twins. Yeah. I'm not saying, I don't know whether that's possible or not, but I don't think they are quite as, I can't hardly lift up a full-size mattress on my own, but I don't think they were like that. So
okay. Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a good point. So, there is, her telling about the emotional turmoil that she's experiencing. That sounds real to me. Yeah. Now, she's putting blame on Anne. Anne is taunting her. Anne is using her lover, Jack, for money. Mm-hmm. I think that there's more of a jealousy aspect going on there. That maybe she's suspecting that Anne and Jack were having their own relationship, sexual relationship, and Winnie is jealous about that.
Yeah, because there's no talk about syphilis or this other woman.
Right.
There's none of that. So ultimately, do you feel like, I think it's clear that she had some mental health struggles, but that's different than somebody who, is triggered and then works really hard to cover everything up,
right?
Which is what she did.
Yeah, I think there is a mental health component. It does not rise up to the level of legal insanity, in my opinion. I think she needed to be held responsible for her crimes. I do not believe that she's somebody that should have been subjected to the death penalty. Life in prison, sure, but the extent that she went through, this is what's just stunning to me is, you literally are cleaning up a double homicide, the victims and crime scene and all, and shipping the victims and the crime scene out to LA to pick them up there. That's crazy from my perspective. That's just really, I think it just underscores sometimes these offenders think too hard, and that was Winnie's downfall. She didn't think about, these bodies are going to leak and they're going to smell and people are going to notice. And that's ultimately, at least you had somebody who was observant enough at the LA train station going, hold on, steamer trunks, that's a problem.
Would it have worked if she had dumped both of those like she wanted Burton to do? Would those trunks have just floated and somebody would have discovered those bodies, both of them floating in the Pacific Ocean?
It's possible that aspects, whether the trunks themselves would have floated. I think with Anne, she's bloated inside the trunk. So in essence, you have a balloon inside that trunk, at least for a period of time. Eventually Anne is going to burst fundamentally. She's going to leak that. And so the buoyancy aspect may not be there. And I don't know, what the buoyancy of these trunks are. Do they sink naturally or do they float? That would be a hard thing to try to surmise as to the trunks themselves. Sammy, with no gases due to the dismemberment, that trunk may have just floated, and there's no way that because of, I actually can't say that. Because I've got bodies, again, in that Helzer case that were much more dismembered than what we're seeing with Sammy. And they were, put in multiple duffel bags, weighed down with walking pavers and stones, and they floated. They came back up, and that's how that case got solved. But it depends on how far you go out off the coast. Even if they do float, do they wash up on shore, or do they just go out into the middle of the ocean and they're in Never Land?
I mean, I'll put a photo on social media of this trunk. I think I've done that before. The trunk, much like her trunk, looks imposing. It's not. It's really light. The problem we had with it was the leather straps had broken off of it. I'm assuming decades ago, and but it had wheels, little tiny caster wheels. Okay. And it's tin, and in the wood that is in there is so lightweight. I'm pretty sure this would float, no problem. And it's a huge trunk. It's I mean, all of the equipment that I use in here, lights, all of everything, it goes in that trunk, and it fits perfectly in that trunk. So that's a 2-body. I would call that a 2-body trunk, the one I have. So it would have floated for sure. I mean, these are meant, even though they're big and sturdy and they look like they take a beating, they're meant to be carried around by a woman. Anybody can carry these,
Sure.
So,
but I actually have a case with a body in a steamer trunk.
You do?
I do. And had nothing to do with the train or being thrown in the water, but it was I won't go into the details because it's a really horrific crime, but it was an elderly woman, petite woman, who was put in her own steamer trunk. And I had to deal with processing both the body as well as the steamer trunk. And once the body was out, that trunk was fairly light. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's meant for being transported on ships and everything else. So anyway, this case, I thought you would think was really interesting. We do talk about, you and I have occasionally talked about the Black Dahlia case, dismemberment. I associate most of the time with men, and when I was reading about this case, I was thinking, I cannot believe one person, and I caught myself saying one woman could do this. And then I thought, I mean, she did it, and she's saying she did it with no help whatsoever. So I thought that was really interesting. And again, I did get a little bit of a kick out of you kept saying he as the offender. And I just thought, what's he going to do when he finds out this starlet-looking woman is the one who does it? So anyway, we will for sure have another compelling case next week. It will not involve a trunk. And I don't know about the female killer part of it. But I like bringing you stories, especially with these sort of, we've dug into a lot of history stuff. There are things in history with this story that, we were able to learn. So I was glad to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, you introduced me to, I guess, what is a famous historical case. So thank you, Kate. And
that you can use luminol, the ingredient, as a sedative. Who knew? Don't do it at home. We're not advocating for anything, but who knew? I'll see you next week.
Sounds good.